producer of Discovery Learning Alliance, a nonprofit organization established by Discovery, I believe in the late 90s, to use media to transform education and improve lives in marginalized communities around the world. Aric produces movies, talk shows, and animated series to shift social norms and educational programming on subjects from malaria to mathematics to Mars. Before Discovery, Aric was an assistant teacher, community health volunteer on a hospital ship, and congressional staff in the US House of Representatives. Dr. Layla Walker is an education pioneer with unique experience and measured success across the education field, having held senior positions in practice, research, and third sector organizations. She's a UK lead for WizeNoze, a Dutch AI company whose mission is to help close the global readability gap. There, she's challenging educators worldwide to stop saying Google it, but rather to provide them with a readable web that contains only reliable and age-appropriate education content, the web for classrooms. Career highlights include the program creation of Generation Global, an international program to counter religious extremism for the Right Honorable Tony Blair, and IDEA, a program to help to skill young people to become employment ready for His Royal Highness the Duke of York. And last but not least, Jonathan Olinger is the founder of Human, a New York-based media company which creates stories and experiences to transform the way the audience sees themselves and others around them. Human is a storytelling agency which works with leading global brands, nonprofits, and startups to advance humanity through story. He's a child rights advocate, a social entrepreneur, and a filmmaker, and strives to invite others to create solutions that protect children and bring equity to humanity. He's sought after as a storytelling consultant for projects ranging from documentaries, feature films, company narratives, and social justice campaigns. So, let's start. Aric, over to you.
All right. Thanks so much. It's great to talk with you all, and I'll try and keep my remarks brief, show a little video, and then look forward to engaging in conversation. So as Katie said, Discovery Learning Alliance is a bit of a unique animal. We were established out of Discovery Incorporated, which you may know the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Eurosport, lots of TV brands. And we were started as a corporate initiative, but very quickly moved into being established as a nonprofit organization to take advantage of more partnership opportunities to be able to scale up and bring others, both public and private sector, on board as partners. We've worked in 16 different countries in terms of our work in the classroom. Today, most of that work right now is in Southern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. I'll talk about two different parts of our work in the classroom and our work in mass media and broadcast. On the school side, we have a four-pronged approach to improving learning outcomes with media as a tool, and then hopefully making it really fun. Not surprisingly, it absolutely starts with the teacher. So most of our work is, and the bulk of our sort of time and effort and staff is around teacher professional development. And that in-service training is about student-centered learning and gender-responsive pedagogy, how to create lesson plans, very practical lessons from neuroeducation or mind-brain education, which is a field many of you are probably very familiar with, but sort of the intersection of psychology and neuroscience and education. The second piece is relevant content. So it's sort of my shortcut is to say malaria, mathematics, and Mars to sort of show the scope of it. But it's educational videos mapped to the curriculum in the language of instruction, relevant and appropriate. We also, the third leg of that stool is sustainable technology. By sustainable, we mean locally sourced, can be replaced, repaired, and replicated by the local school community. So we're typically not doing really fancy computer labs, but rather doing smart monitors, TVs, and DVD players, whatever sort of is appropriate, and that the local community can replace and fix as necessary. So it's truly sustainable. And then the fourth piece is community action mobilization. And all of this is together to improve learning outcomes and community engagement in schools. And for us, that academic, the learning outcomes are both academic and social, emotional. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in the course of our work in schools, communities kept coming to us and saying, we'd really like you to also address other issues and sort of move outside the classroom. That started with HIV in Southern Africa years ago. And so we did an HIV, a scripted feature film. So very different from the sort of educational documentaries for the classroom that we had done, but this was an entertaining, scripted movie about a Kenyan footballer trying to make it in South Africa, but then with messages and very clear messaging about how the science of AIDS works, how HIV works inside the body. So some people would call that edutainment, others would call it social behavior change communication. I prefer sort of media for social impact, but however you sort of phrase it, that kind of work, the communities really led us into that area. So we did the HIV film. We've done more recently one about a musical group in Southern Africa and wrestling with stardom, but also tuberculosis. So again, in that sort of, entertaining, marketed as a piece of entertainment, but with messaging woven throughout. We've done talk shows about gender issues and girls' education, demonstrating the value of girls' education in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria, and trying to do those again at a very high level, great production values, really engaging with audiences so that they became very, very popular and were really part of the public dialogue. Those two films, the HIV film, the tuberculosis film, are the #1 and #2 films ever in Africa, and that's against Titanic, Avatar, even the Avengers, even Black Panther, and mostly because we distribute in a very different way. We go to free-to-air broadcasters, country by country, and get massive audiences. So today I just wanted to show a clip of something that is actually in production, so it's still relatively new, not quite finished, this very first episode. This is in partnership with the UK Department for International Development and their Girls Education Challenge. And that project is about getting girls in school and making sure they're learning when they get there. So there are sort of pieces, the academic, the literacy and numeracy, and the social, emotional piece, and the sort of community piece around building an enabling environment for girls and those communities. So we're looking at both life skills and literacy and numeracy content. I'm not showing you the literacy and numeracy content. This is more the life skills piece. So this is called My Better World. And it's, if that name sounds familiar, that title, you may be familiar with a brilliant organization just not too far in Cambridge called CamFed. They have a sort of a well sort of proven curriculum called My Better World around life skills for girls. So we worked in tandem with them to take that workbook and turn it into a video series. So this is a 55 episode series. They're short, they're 8 minutes apiece, but we created it in such a way that would be easy to distribute across different platforms. So you can do 8 minutes in a small group setting like this, with a girls club or a youth club, or you can package 3 together for a half hour of broadcast television with commercial breaks. So, what else can I tell you about this before we show it? We wove elements of neuroeducation into this, particularly around growth mindset. So there's some of that in here. It's unusual because it's a bit of a hybrid. It's animation and live action in real life stories. So we have a cast of characters that our audience can relate to, this gang of friends, and as they learn and walk through life lessons, our audience is sort of right there with them learning these things. But then at the height of the action, we cut to a real life documentary to sort of exemplify the lesson that we're talking about in that particular episode. And that could be about being purpose-driven or staying healthy, being confident. And those stories are everything from a blind businessman to a really touching story about this young girl who carries her best friend to school because she can't walk, to this really amazing woman in Kenya who works with drones. So it's quite fascinating to see those stories and how they play with and sort of the interplay between the live action and the animated story. So I'll just show you a clip here. It's not, again, it's almost finished. There's some color issues that we're still dealing with, and also some audio issues. In this episode, I'll show you the introduction, just to sort of give you a flavor, and then I'll cut to the documentary element, just in the interest of time. In this particular episode, one of the friends, Grace, is not attending school regularly, and her friends are trying to figure out what's going on and why that's the case.
Welcome to My Better World. Hi, my name is Abby. This is the start of a journey that is all about improving your life. So how are we going to do that? By learning from each other. My friends and I are always discovering things about our lives,
finding ways to help us understand the world around us.
and help us to make better choices and to think about the future. We are going to help each other understand what well-being is and how to find the strength inside us all.
Strength that can make a difference to our family, community, our country.
Even the whole world. Welcome to My Better World. So, who are we? Well, Amina loves football and is our star goalkeeper. Her brother Yusuf is great at making all kinds of things. Yes, Rosa is our future scientist. She loves collecting cool things to show us. And that is Freddie. He is the most brilliant singer, but can be a little shy sometimes. And that is Grace. She loves making clothes. Being well, the watermelon story.
Now, who can tell me what factors influence
So now we're just gonna
weather
cut
and
to
climate? Grace?
the
Will you tell us what's
transition.
going on?
Well, you know how it is. During watermelon season, my mother makes me miss classes to sell them in the market. And when I do come to school, I'm so far behind. I don't even know what is going on.
So you have to sell all these watermelons.
Just wait.
You have to sell all of this?
Yes, they are all from my uncle's farm. The whole family helps out.
Why didn't you ask us for help?
You have your own things to worry about.
Don't be silly. That is what friends are for. Maybe we can help. Let us meet Fatima from Nigeria to see how she was able to achieve well-being.
My name is Fatima. I am a pilot. I'm the first female pilot from my home state, Kano State. It has always been my dream. I always wanted to be a pilot. I have a passion for it. I always wanted to be in the cockpit, handling the controls myself, making this huge machine do what I wanted to do.
So that just kind of gives you a bit of a flavor. Hopefully that's, and it's been really fun for us because we've typically been working, well, each genre has its own sort of opportunities and challenges, whether it's a talk show or a feature film that you're trying to really, present amazing, world-class production values, and then something here which is less about production values and more about sort of story and character and connecting with audiences. And it's been fun to see adults connect in some of the testing with this. But this is just the first of 55 episodes, so we're sort of in the thick of it. But anyway, I'll leave it there. It's been great fun talking about sort of facing and embracing uncertainty with you all, and look forward to the conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Aric. Ella, over to you.
You ready to press button?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I got given the other day by my boss. So I'm going to start.
Just tell me when to slide
Yeah,
through.
just go to the next one. That's fine. Sorry. So I'm going to start here. This is my entry point on my attempt at making what we do relevant to this discussion. So if we take I'm sure you're all familiar with Article 19, and the importance of this really is on a revised version that occurred just a couple of years ago. I'm not going to read on your behalf, but if you could just click onto the next piece. There is a real push, as you may be aware, that internet access is almost a human right, that everybody. So there's a real push that governments should be providing infrastructure and providing it all. And one of the reasons for that is that some talk about the internet having the capability of democratising education. Interesting. Move on to the next piece. But here's the problem. It's as simple as this. 75% of us, and this is an underestimation, cannot understand what's written on the internet. The majority of what's written on the internet is written at the highest level. It's for the most elite writers. And it was interesting coming to this event today because I spent a lot of time the last year working with WizeNoze in understanding how language can be impactful and how actually we do ourselves a real disservice across all sectors. So even when I got given this sentence, I can tell you without even putting it through our machine learning that this is written at the highest level.
Yeah.
So even myself, I'm educated to PhD, I'm really like, okay. And I've always, as an ex-teacher as well, we need to walk the talk, So I found this interesting. I find how the UN write interesting because who actually can unpick that article and properly understand it. If we're really talking about pluralism and inclusiveness, we need to communicate for that audience as well. And that's not just verbally, but that's how we write as well. And academia is as much to blame as anybody for keeping that elite writing going. So WizeNoze came up with this because the company originally wanted to come up with a better solution for how we actually go about determining what the reading level on any particular content is. So the training data they used in their machine learning was online content. And that's how they came up with that staggering figure. And this is in English language. So from finding this out, WizeNoze does have a readability index, the WizeNoze readability index. It's a scale of 1 to 5. And anybody can get hold of it, and you put any content, your website, any material in it, and it will tell you what audience you've written for and how you may want to simplify it, in most cases, for the audience you actually want to read and understand your stuff. Another interesting stat, if you didn't know this already, the average reading age in the UK for an adult is age 11. If you go onto our government sites, our .gov.uk sites are not written for an age 11 reading level. So we're pushing the internet, and we're pushing it for good reason, because as we said this morning, I came from the Global Ed Tech conference yesterday, and the big discussion is about, we are not going to be able to, the fact is we're not going to be able to recruit enough teachers to meet the population. We have to come up with blended learning solutions. We don't take the human, the next teacher, don't take the human away completely, but we have to look at blended solution for this. So the internet potentially is a good space for education, but we have to address 3 issues with the internet. It wasn't built for education. It's a commercially driven entity. However, you go into schools, certainly in the UK, and the internet is commonly used. Schools spend thousands filtering and monitoring to keep it safe within their schools. And the reason being this: the internet provides the most relevant material for education. So when some of you are, and a lot of what we're talking about in education now is we're pushing phenomenon learning, we're pushing what they're calling purposeful learning. So I don't know if you're aware, Stanford in the next 10 years are going to move from majors to missions. So they're moving towards their courses will be for careers. And that's what education is now trying to do. We have to get people better ready for work-based learning. So there's a huge shift going in education, but the internet does need to play a role here. But the internet wasn't built for education, and what's there for education is often written at a very high level for whatever reason. The other thing about what's on the internet is that it's often difficult for our young people, as we know, to decipher whether something's reliable. Is it fake? Is it, that's quite a skill in itself. So, sorry, the next slide. This stat, I got this one last week. 2% of UK children do not have the critical skills to determine if online content is fake and from an unreliable source. However, teachers will still say, and as a parent, you may still say, go Google it. what support are we giving?
2%. It must be more than 2%.
2%.
Have.
Can.
Do not. Oh, sorry.
That-
Yeah,
that-
yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's like, that's pretty good.
That would be good, wouldn't it? Sorry.
It's like, wow, what are they doing
Yeah.
so
My
well?
job's done. I'm going home.
Was this a test to see what our reading level was?
Yeah, there it is. Oh, I love it.
I don't know 2% of
Yeah, well, but 2%, and that is staggering. That is staggering. But it's an issue, isn't it? Because everybody's worried suddenly about fake news. Fake news has been there, propaganda has been out there forever. It's not necessarily there's more of it. I think people are just saying that we need to be a bit more aware of it. So we're using the internet to supposedly democratise education, but there's issues. A lot of what's written there isn't at a reading level that most of us can read, and it certainly isn't tagged. There's no way of working out what's on there that when you open a URL, what reading level is it actually at. There's no way of necessarily knowing whether it's reliable or a relevant source as well. So the company, with all this information, decided to take a prototype into education, which we call the Web for Classrooms. Now the Web for Classrooms, sorry, I can't remember what I put on next. Go to the next one actually. The Web for Classrooms is literally, next one, is literally a search engine. And in there is online content that you would find if you did a Google search, but it's content that educators have said and approved. It's peer-approved content. Now, that's taken away one of the biggest headaches that both adults and kids have in education, which is who can really do who knows how to do a good query search, really? Are you taught how to do a query search? When I go into schools and ask kids, have you been formally taught how to do query search? Does your teacher know how? No. But we learn by mistakes, we're getting a little bit better at it. And it's the only resource I know, the internet, that is used in that way. So my doctorate was in how practitioners thinking and how they take a resource into the classroom and why they made that decision. And there's usually some thought that goes into, I'm going to use a textbook for this, or I'm going to use this machine for this, or I'm going to use a video or the TV for this. And usually then you do some pedagogical thinking about how best to actually deliver it in the classroom. The internet, for some reason, has brought complacency to a lot of classrooms, and whether it's because people think it's something that's so common at home that kids can do, but when we've eye-tracked kids on using the internet, it's similar to adults. They get distracted. Their original search is nowhere near where they end up on their search. So the Web for Classrooms has a repository of educator-approved content on there, and then our machine learning goes into play. So first thing they do is put in their age. That sets the suitability. All our content has also been tagged to suitability for a particular age, and that's important because you may be a 15-year-old with a low reading age, but you still want material that's suitable for your age range. You don't want babyish content, you need it to be appropriate, and the other way around as well. You put in a query search, it's very similar to what you'd see potentially in Google, apart from you will see content that has been chosen for your reading level. We have a scale 1 to 5. If you find the content too difficult, you can move the scale down and it will give you search results at a lower reading level. And the ability to be agile in that way is important because no learner is at a particular reading level for every piece of content. Because if you're a football fanatic during the World Cup, chances are you can probably cope with some content online that's at a much higher reading level than, say, if you're a student struggling in science, you may then want to drop down your reading level. It also gives teachers agility as well. So the Web for Classrooms, we've started, it's in 80% of Dutch schools, the Dutch government supported it. We are beginning to look at being the default search engine for some of the school platforms in the UK. And nicely in this room actually, we are trialling with sort of the German education schools as well, and 2 of the academies as well, 2 of the academies, because we certainly don't think we've got it right quite yet, But what we're trying to do is take away a lot of the pain and expectation that young people are expected to do with the internet. But my final point is this: we don't say, don't use Google. We're just saying, just like in a classroom, you would, as a chemistry teacher, I would bring in particular material or a textbook that I knew had the content, was set at a particular reading level, etc., to help that learner, instead of saying, go to that huge library over there and go and find some content on Key Stage 4 equilibrium for chemistry. But there are times when we need to look at that big critical skill around the internet and queer researchers as well. So that's what we do. And if anybody's working with schools and education that would like to pilot and use this to see the difference in your kids' learning outcomes when they have access to web classrooms compared to Google, we'd love to speak to you.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. So I think I'll just start by explaining a little bit about Human, which is a storytelling platform, which we launched about 7 years ago, and within that we have an agency that works with clients like the United Nations, or did a lot of the storytelling for Malala, or UNICEF, or intergovernmental agencies like Interpol, but also companies like Airbnb, and usually in some level trying to advance people or planet. So we are, I think, in the context of OXSCIE and this concept of uncertainty within education, I'm thinking more long-term about schools 2030, and kind of couching that more broadly in the Sustainable Development Goals. I think I would like to just share a little video which is called The Story You Are Shaping, and the only thing I'll say to preface this is that we actually created this film for the United Nations in 2015 when they launched the SDGs, and you probably know, but at the time it was the largest gathering of world leaders in human history up until COP21. And so our brief was to basically speak to those world leaders when they were inside the General Assembly and kind of create a tone similar to how we hope to have done yesterday with the film that we started the conference with here. But in this case it was, all these world leaders in a room, so it was quite intimidating, but also an opportunity. And I think the reason why film is so powerful and the UN wanted to use that is just because obviously you're talking about not full-on multi-sensory, but you're speaking, you're hearing audio, you're seeing visuals, and I think storytelling is the oldest form of human learning, we could probably say, and perhaps the most effective. Maybe some educators who actually do research on that would disagree with me, but I do think it can sometimes trump didactic forms of kind of telling people what to think, or just simply presenting a story. It seems somehow coded in the human makeup and our DNA and kind of the experience that we actually absorb more through that medium and kind of platform. So I think that I'm really fascinated on a high level with humans' capacity to extend their narrative concern beyond themselves. And perhaps this is the greatest thing that we ever learn as human beings, meaning that we're born, obviously, focused very much on our own story, and whether we're conscious of it or not, it's very selfish pursuit of food and comfort and warmth and protection, shelter, all of that. And then over time, it seems that we have this capacity to start to care about the story of our family and their outcome and what happens to them. Maybe then to our social group or ethnic group, and extending that to city, state, and nation. And then from there moving beyond to kind of civilization at large, and what we would call maybe like your cultural neighbor. And then even looking at humanity more broadly, then the biosphere, even actually starting to care about, life in other forms like little animals or plants. and then moving beyond that into ecological systems of life that allow us to understand the interconnectivity of all things. And then moving beyond that to even the planet and seeing that as like a connected system. And now, as you know, we're even starting to think about the narrative of, exoplanets and planets that aren't our own, and perhaps, not necessarily caring so much about their outcome, but maybe even imagining ourselves interacting with new planets. And so the human capacity, to go from the self all the way into the cosmos, I think is the interesting, fascinating journey that we all get to go on, and in maybe a philosophical sense is the foundation for learning. Learning how to share, learning how to coexist, learning how to collaborate, and then when that translates to areas of society, whether it's governance or the environment, or art and culture, I think that's kind of the foundation of what we're thinking about. So all that to say, well, if you don't mind, since you're nearby, just playing that, double-clicking this. This is a short clip I'll share, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with a few thoughts. But this was what was played before the world leaders inside the General Assembly when they were adopting the Sustainable Development Agenda, and tries to just help place them in a larger meta-narrative. And we wrote it not just to them as world leaders, but to all of human beings.
This story began long before you, and it will continue long after you. But for now, this story is yours to shape. This is the story of humanity and of the earth we inhabit. This is our declaration of interdependence. Our commitment to honor the rights of all people everywhere. To protect the planet, our common home. To create shared prosperity. To strengthen universal peace and free the world from fear and violence. To work together in partnership so that no one is left behind. We will free the human race from the tyranny of poverty. We will heal and safeguard our planet for all generations and shift our world onto a sustainable path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge to include every human. So we gather, we build, we write, we create, we imagine, we collaborate, we dream, we play, we speak, we run, we work, we share, we love. This is the story you are shaping.
So in context with Schools 2030 and this broader kind of initiative of facing uncertainties on a global scale, which, by the way, is the foundation of any good story, is uncertainty. I think if you just watch any movie and the classic 3-act structure, which begins with some sort of inciting moment where a character is faced with a challenge and therefore a choice, what will I do with this moment that I've been presented, and this choice is usually the beginning of every good film, where they step out into the unknown, into a forest, or into an ocean, or into a society, or a courtroom, or whatever it might be, and face the unknown. And as they do that, people come along to help them, and they learn something that either transforms or destroys them. And this is the process of kind of moving towards this climactic moment where everything comes to a head, and all the things that they've learned along the journey is presented in this one moment where they're, the outcome is to be determined. And I think when you think more broadly about the future of humanity and recognizing that it's many things, but it most certainly is education that will determine that narrative and that arc of human history. And so that's something that seemingly, certainly everyone here would agree with, and I think most humans would agree with. Then really addressing those uncertainties could be the most important thing we do as human beings. And within that context, for some of our clients, over time we've developed something called narrative design, which is essentially just trying to map out objectives, what we call objectives-based storytelling. And so I offer this only in the sense of this broader effort that we're all participating in. Perhaps this is useful, and just to kind of wrap up, but basically it starts with identifying objectives. And within that, I think what we sometimes borrow this term from militaries, which is an end state, where when militaries are planning an operation, they define an end state. And while military is not usually our paragon of, it is a useful term. So within that, I think it's necessary first to define the current state. So the end state being that outcome which you want it to be, which I think would be equality, equity for all, okay, and ending poverty, all those things. So the last thing I would say is using storytelling to kind of achieve those objectives can be a very powerful tool. And right now, I think what we're all participating is defining that current state, and then also defining that end state. And the storytelling has such a role in that.
Thank you. All right.
Before we jump into questions, could I just put together two things that you said and then draw an interesting conclusion?